Thank you, Isabel. Sorry for the slight delay, everybody. We've had problems with my internet this morning. Welcome and thank you all for attending the virtual meeting of the RBKC Licensing Subcommittee. I'm Councillor Sof McVeigh and I'll be chairing this meeting. It's being held via Microsoft Teams, and also on the committee we have Councillor Blakeman and Councillor Spalding. Councillors, can you please turn your cameras on and introduce yourself?
Good morning, Chairman. It's Councillor Malcolm Spalding. I'm the Councillor for Earls Court Ward.
Good morning, I'm Judith Blakeman. I'm Councillor for Nottingdale Ward.
Fantastic, thank you. And everyone should have received all the procedures and reconnecting issues if we lose connection. And if I could ask everyone please to turn their cameras off to help connectivity, and to mute everything until you're invited to speak would be very helpful. Thank you. And we are joined remotely by our licensing team, Sharon Dyball and Paul Phelan, and our legal officer today is Lindsay Limazurier. And also with us we have Isabel Saunders and Yasmin Jama and Leonie Hill. And Isabel will be helping us with all our technical issues as well, which is very important. And sorry, Judith?
We've got Horatio Chance here.
And being supported by Horatio, but Lindsay is leading on it. Thank you. And so due to internet connections, I just want to make sure we appoint a substitute chair. So committee members, please, I'm going to nominate Councillor Spalding to be substitute chair in case I lose. Judith, do you mind seconding that?
I second that.
Fantastic, thank you. So if I drop out again, Councillor Malcolm Spalding will take over. Malcolm, are you okay with that?
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And I would also like to confirm that I have no declaration of interest in this case. The case before us today is to grant a licence for the Sustainable Spirit Company for the ground floor 1A Hazelwood Tower, Golborne Gardens, London W10. So I have no declaration of interest. Other committee members?
No interest, Chairman.
Yes, I know Councillor Mason and I know Sue Duggins, but I have not discussed this application with either of them.
Thank you. Yes, of course, myself and Councillor Spalding also know Councillor Mason, but likewise, I have not discussed this application with him. Councillor Spalding, do you just want to confirm that?
Yes, Chairman, I do know Councillor Mason, but I have not discussed this case with any of the parties who are present today or anybody else outside the committee.
Fantastic, thank you. So I'm just going to, before we get going, I'm just going to briefly outline the procedure. But again, this has been circulated with all the papers and is online. So first, the licensing officers will give a brief outline of the application. Could you please confirm your attendance and which one of Mr. Phelan or Ms. Dyball will be speaking?
Good morning, Chair. It will be Paul Phelan speaking today.
Thank you, Paul. Welcome. And then I will ask the applicant's legal advisor, Mr. Harry Cook, to present his submission. He'll have a maximum of 10 minutes, and he's joined also by the applicant, Mr. Mark Hill. Can you please both confirm your attendance today?
Yes, I can confirm my attendance. Just to say, Mark Hill will be making the submission, not myself.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Hill, are you here?
Yes, I'm present. Thank you.
Great, fantastic. And then questions will be asked by the committee to the applicant, and then the objectors will also ask questions as well. And then it'll be the objectors' case. So we have Councillor Mason and Mr. Darren Turner will present their objections. They'll have, again, 10 minutes each. Please, can you both confirm your attendance? Councillor Mason?
Yes, Chairman, I'm in attendance, and I should record that, as you did earlier, I'm a member of the licensing committee. I know all of the members of the committee for the reasons you mentioned. Of course, I haven't discussed this case with any of you.
Thank you. And Mr. Darren Turner?
Good morning. Hi. Yeah, just good morning.
Fantastic. Thank you. And then, thank you. And then questions will be asked to to the objectors by the members of the committee first, and then the applicant will also have a chance to ask you questions. And then after this, we'll turn to our legal officer to deal with any questions you may have, and then finally turn to governance and licensing officers just to see if there's anything additional. And there will be no summing up, and the meeting will end. So before we start, I'd just like to remind everyone that the committee has read all the papers and all the additional papers that we have received last week as well. So please do draw our attention to them. As you can see on the screen, which the licensing officers will be controlling, are the papers. And so if you want to turn to any paper, please do just ask and we can move it on the screen, which would be very helpful. Thank you. So let's get going. I'm going to turn my camera off. Please do turn your camera on if you want to when you're speaking, but there's no need to. And can everyone please just stay on mute, would be very helpful. So Mr. Phelan, would you please outline the case for us? Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning. This application is made by Green Box Drinks Limited for the grant of a premises license at ground floor 1A Hazelwood Tower, Goulburn Gardens, W10 5DT. For the sale by retail of alcohol for consumption off the premises, Monday to Friday, from midday until 1700 hours. The licensed area is a small office with 8 desks for 8 members of staff, where online sales of alcohol will be dispatched to members of the public. The applicant has confirmed that the premises will not be open to the public, and the plans found on page 15 of the committee report confirm the office as the licensed area. The applicant has proposed several conditions to promote the licensing objectives, full details of which can be found on page 2 of the committee papers. This authority has received 3 objections, including one from Councillor Mason. A summary of these representations can be found on pages 3 and 4 of the committee papers, and a copy of the representations can be found at Appendix D at pages 16 to 25. Additional papers have been submitted by both the applicant and the objectors. The additional papers were submitted by the applicant were circulated on the 6th and 7th of July 2020, with additional papers from the objectors circulated on the 9th and 10th of July. This application was due to be heard on the 28th of May 2020. However, due to an issue with the publication of the newspaper, the consultation period was reset for a further 28-day period. For the avoidance of doubt, I can confirm that the applicant has complied with all requirements regarding the advertising of this application. The applicant has confirmed in his supplementary papers that the bulk of his business is to the hospitality industry, and I would like to confirm for the committee's benefit that this element of the business does not constitute a sale by retail of alcohol under section 192 of the Licensing Act 2003, so does not require a premises license. A premises license is however required for any online sales to the public for the premises where the alcohol is dispatched to the customer, which in this case is the office at Hazelwood Tower. That concludes the summary of this application. I'll leave it there for now, unless there is anything else I can be of help with at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Phelan. That was very helpful, and for clarifying that this is an adjourned. Sorry, I'm just putting my camera on. For clarifying that this is an adjourned thing from the adjourned hearing from the 28th of May. So now for the applicant's case, please. So, Mr. Hill, you have 10 minutes. Would you please like to present your case? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd like to discuss firstly the background to the company, and I'd like to discuss our existing business, although it's already been touched upon by Mr. Phelan. And then I'd like to explain the business case for needing this premises license. And then we're going to touch upon some of the objections and how they're perhaps misplaced. So the Sustainable Spirit Company is a small, innovative company which has been an occupant of Hazelwood Tower for the past 7 years. We employ 3 members of staff, all 3 of which are personal licensees. The business is a registered alcohol wholesaler with the IWRS ID XEAW 103730. The business also holds WAGA certificates to hold goods under bond at 2 licensed warehouses. The business exists as to promote sustainable practices within the hospitality industry. Our main innovation, if you will, is that we supply bottles for life to bars and restaurants, which are then refilled from 2.8 litre eco pouches, which is a patent pending invention of the company. We also sell a moderate amount of sparkling wine and natural wines, which is a more recent development in the company. The huge bulk of our business is sales to bars, restaurants, hotels, wholesalers and retailers. At Hazelwood Tower itself, we have a showroom for tastings, and we also have a storeroom where our exhibition stands and promotional bars are stored. And we also hold a small quantity of alcohol, wines and spirits at Tenancy's. With the onset of the coronavirus, all of our business ceased to bars, restaurants and hotels. And we had to try and build a direct sales model to sell to people at home, as this was the only opportunity to make revenue in this difficult time. To give you an idea of the scale of the online business previously, the company had net online sales of £69.22 for 2020 before lockdown, which represented 0.05% of the company's sales. Since lockdown, we've obviously tried to make the best of it, and we've built sales significantly in this time under 10 licenses. So going on to the objections, a lot of the objections I feel stem to a mistaken idea of what is actually stored at Hazelwood Tower. What we store is primarily event equipment for our event business, where we go around to music festivals, food and drink festivals, set up stands. We have a tent, and we also store merchandise. We also store a small amount of wine and spirits to support these events for sale to local businesses, backup stock, and samples. At any one time, the total quantity of wine and spirits stored at the location would fit upon a single pallet. The second misapprehension regards the flammability of the wines and spirits that we actually store. Wines are not flammable in any respect. They're actually a fire retardant, and that accounts for half, probably more than half, of the alcohol we store at Hazelwood Tower. The spirits we store are all in sealed containers. They're under 40% alcohol by volume, which is not flammable at room temperatures. These are matters of fact. They're not debatable. It's just the truth. Where we store the wines and spirits is in a sealed concrete room with a concrete floor. We store the wines and spirits on metal steel racks. There are no ignition sources in the room. In fact, there's not a single plug in the room. There's just one box light. So the risk of ignition is very low. Then the next thing I'd like to touch upon is the unfair characterization of the Sustainable Spirit Company as somehow an illegally trading company. As is already touched upon by Mr. Phelan, we had no requirements to be licensed to wholesale wines and spirits to the hospitality industry. Also, the accusations of antisocial behaviour are not supported by other residents in the building. We've taken a sample of 3 residents who have had no issues with us over the 7.5 years that we've been occupying this premises. The evidence submitted, or the photos submitted, are also somewhat misleading. Several of the photos of pallets have nothing to do with us. They've been investigated by the council and have found to be their businesses in the area. Also, the pallets, we never dumped pallets outside our storeroom. They were left there for collection, which normally happened between 24 and 48 hours after being put there. When this was highlighted as an issue, we now store them inside our storeroom waiting for collection, which is more complicated, but we still do it. Similarly, the company has taken on board comments regarding smoking in public places of one of our employees. And now we have imposed a company policy which doesn't allow smoking within 10 metres of Hazelwood Tower, despite this not being a legal requirement. So we are trying to listen to residents' issues and responding accordingly to them. I think that's pretty much all I have to say on it. So yeah, I think that's sort of sums up my initial statement.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Hill. We're now going to turn to the committee for some questions, if that's okay. So I'm going to start with Councillor Blakeman. Would you like to ask some questions to the applicant? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Can you give us a bit more information about your eco pouches? For example, what are they made of? What do they contain? How many are stored? Are they flammable? As a start, yeah.
Okay, so the eco pouches, they're made of a polymer laminate. So it's a sandwich plastic material of nylon, polyethylene, and polypropylene. They contain 2.8 litres of liquid, and they come in cases of 3 units. So there's 8.4 litres per case. And the stock we hold there, they're not flammable at room temperature, but if you heated them to a high temperature, they would be flammable. They're not classed as accelerants in fire prevention terms. In terms of how much we store, I can bring up, I've got a stock take from the 30th of June, and we had 7 cases of vodka, 1 case of white rum, 4 cases of dark rum, and 1 case of gin. At the same time, we had 64 litres of fruit juice, 30 litres of fruit purees, and 90 litres of mixers stored right next door to them. And we also had a similar quantity of wine. Does that answer all your questions?
No, well, that answers my first questions, yes. Right. Secondly, if you go to page 15 of the original pack, which is the plan of the premises, I can't see a showroom and I can't see a storage room.
The showroom is the office.
Okay.
And the storeroom is accessed from outside the building. So it's not in this diagram.
So is it in Hazelwood Tower?
It is in Hazelwood Tower, yes.
Okay. Now, is it correct that the ventilated window is located directly next to the emergency exit for the tower?
So I believe there's a picture of the same in my submission, and it is the case. Well, I don't know how immediately next door you think, but yeah, it's within probably 2 or 3 meters. I should probably mention the alcohol in the storeroom is stored on the opposite side of the room from the ventilated window.
Yes. Now, can you?
Yeah, you can see on the screen now.
Yeah. Okay.
There's the bike hanger, the door, and then you can see you can kind of just about see the fire exit.
Okay. So the premises, it says.
Sorry, Judith. Sorry, can I just interrupt you? I just want to get this really clear.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the left-hand picture or the right? We're looking at the right-hand picture with the bike hanger.
Yeah.
And the lighter green is the door.
Yeah.
And then small, yes, if you could point to it. Thank you, Sharon. So that's the door. And then to the left of that is the window, that slightly darker bit just there.
That's correct, yes.
And then the fire escape is the grey to the left.
A little bit off past the railings, but yes.
So not that area under those windows.
No, it is there under the windows, yes.
It is there. And so that area back in there is your storage room.
Yeah.
And then where's your office in relation to that then?
So on the, if you look on the right-hand picture with the bike hanger, you can see the window.
Sharon, on the right-hand picture.
On the right-hand picture. So, I mean, or you can look at the left-hand picture. You can see the railings, the blue railings on the left-hand picture. So basically it's the other corner of the of that side of Hazelwood Tower. Yeah, so it's in that location, yeah. And the storeroom sort of goes sort of forwards from the door, as it were.
I understand. And while we're talking about this, I'm sorry, Judith, we will come back to your questions in 1 second. I just think this is important to clarify. And I wonder if I could please bring in our legal advisor here, Ms. Missouri. Because we have not got a plan of this storage area, it is not part of the license application because it is not a licensable activity to store alcohol. A licensable activity only relates to the sale of alcohol. Please, could you confirm that?
Thank you, Chairman. That is correct. The licensable activity is the sale by retail of alcohol, not the storage.
Thank you very much. Sorry, so Councillor Blakeman, would you please continue your questions? Thank you.
Yes, I wanted to ask about the compartmentalisation of the premises and how long the compartmentalisation would last in the event of a fire.
So both the office and the storeroom are fully sealed concrete boxes, as far as I'm aware, apart from in the case of the office, it has 2 glass glazed windows that don't open, and it has a glazed door. The storeroom is, again, it's a fully sealed concrete box with a door and a grill window. So in terms of fire penetrating the concrete to upper parts of the building, I'd say, I mean, I'm not an expert in this, but I think it would be in the hours.
So can I interrupt you there? So you're saying that the fire brigade have not actually inspected that element of it?
They have inspected it, but they didn't give us a report on it.
Okay. And they didn't give a report to the North Kensington Fire Station either, according to one of the objections.
I don't know which
that.
fire brigade came, but we've been visited on numerous occasions by the fire brigade, also by the council's enforcement team. I'm saying probably we've been visited between 10 and 20 times over the years. Okay. And every time, both the council and the fire brigade have been completely satisfied of the risk level of what we're doing and our compliance, and we've tried to furthermore improve upon our fire risk status, as we're very mindful of the local residents and wanting to ensure and reassure safety.
Right. In December 2019, trading standards were told that no alcohol was kept on the premises. But then in April 2020, you confirmed that alcohol was kept on the premises. What happened to change that situation?
I think it's a mistake from the report on the 29th of December. We've always kept a small amount of wines and spirits on the premises, and we've never made any secret of that fact. As we said, it's not a licensable activity. We're a wine and spirits company. It's our business. So I'm not entirely sure in what sense wires got crossed in that respect. Our understanding of fulfilling retail orders from the premises is actually the legal position is a bit of a grey area, as online sales is a relatively new phenomenon and the legislation hasn't really caught up. What it actually says, as per my understanding, is that a premises license is not required for the point of order, and as long as the goods have been stored in a licensed warehouse beforehand, that could be deemed to have complied with licensing laws. We were advised otherwise on a visit on the 2nd of April, and we applied for our premises license on that very day.
Yeah, so the letter from Revenue and Customs states, it indicates where your bonded warehouses are, and it doesn't include Hazelwood Tower.
A bonded warehouse is a tax warehouse, so the alcohol duties and VAT are only applied on the goods when they leave the warehouse. Hazelwood Tower is not a bonded warehouse.
But, I mean, if you got your license in 2012 from the TMO, and that lease permits the storage of alcohol on the premises, is that correct?
It does, yeah.
And at the time of the granting of the lease, was the freeholder, the council, aware that you would be storing alcohol on the premises?
I assume they were. I mean, we are a wine and spirits company, and we that's what we applied for the lease for.
Okay, so I was a bit confused about your report about the sale of alcohol. You said that you had to sell them from bonded warehouses, but now you're saying you can sell them from Hazelwood Tower as well.
Well, the vast majority of our stock is stored at these two warehouses, and the orders are fulfilled from the warehouses to our customers. But yeah, we're allowed to store alcohol. There's no specific legal requirement for a separate license to store duty-paid alcohol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I may come back with further questions. I'll see what Councillor Spalding asks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you, Councillor Bateman. Just before I turn to Councillor Spalding, if I could just clarify a few things that Councillor Bateman has brought up with Mr. Hill, which I wonder if perhaps we could turn to our legal advice about again regarding online sales. And the definition of when the sale takes place, because that is crucial to which area is defined in the licensed premises.
That's correct, Chairman. Where the online sale takes place in the office, but the alcohol is released from the warehouse, the release from the warehouse is deemed to be the point of sale at that point, which is why Hazelwood Tower didn't need a premises licence. But when the alcohol is released to the courier from Hazelwood Tower, that is why we need the premises licence now. That is where the point of sale is then.
Right. So the point of sale is the actual handing over of the alcohol to the courier.
I believe it's section 190 or 192 of the Licensing Act. Just bear with me, I can find out. But yes, that is the correct legal position. Okay,
that is very clear. Thank you very much. And I'd also just like to clarify, Mr. Hill, if I could turn to you again, just while we're still on this issue. If you could just clarify a bit for us, a little bit more about, I understand obviously the situation's changed completely in March because of COVID. That's why the situation is different from how you've been operating before. But are your bonded warehouses, is it because they have a certain kind of, the couriers can only do certain things in bulk, hence they would have been going to retail premises beforehand, and so now you're talking about 1 or 2 bottles to an individual person, and would your bonded warehouses not cover issues like that? Is that why the change is happening now?
That's exactly the point. So one of our bonded warehouses only operates in pallet quantities, so that's law distribution. So we keep our stock there for international export. So a typical order might be a container of gin going to the USA. Clearly, they're not going to fulfill an order for a single bottle. They're just not set up to do it. They'd probably put a single bottle on a pallet and send it. Our other bonded warehouse, London City Bond, is principally set up to supply the bars, restaurants and hotels of London. And we do fulfill some online retail orders from there. But again, the minimum quantity they deal with is a case. So it's uneconomic to pay the £12.50 minimum distribution charge to fulfill an order of a single bottle. So the only way we can economically fulfill the order of a single bottle is by using other courier means, which initially was just the Royal Mail. So initially we were packing bottles and taking them to the post office. And it's only when we got to a few more than just a couple of bottles a week that we were in a position to actually get a cost-effective courier contract to come and collect from us. Does that answer your question?
You're muted, Councillor McVeigh.
Sorry, thank you, Councillor Spalding. You very helpfully, Mr. Hill, told us about your stock take recently, and I was just kind of totting it up as Councillor Blakeman was asking questions. And it sounds like you have 13. I just want to get the balance between the spirits versus the mixers and the fruit juice and all that on one pallet. It sounds as if you have 13 cases, 7 for 1 and 1. And I believe those cases have 8.4 litres in, from my understanding. So that comes up to 252 litres. But then I didn't catch the mixers and the fruit juices. How many litres you were saying you had of those?
So on the 30th of June, we had 90 litres of mixers. So that's tonic water, soda water and soft drinks. We had 30 litres of fruit purees. And we had 64 litres of fruit juices. Okay. We also had 24 cases of sparkling wine, and that's 4.5 litres per case. Okay, so there seems to be a similar amount of litres for the spirits as to the mixers, and then plus the wine as well. And okay, so I will come back with some more questions, but we're going to turn to Councillor Spalding now. So I just wanted to clarify those points. Thank you. Councillor Spalding, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Hill.
Good morning.
A couple of quick confirmations. Do you use the office as a showroom and invite customers in for tastings? And if so, do they have to pay for those tastings, or is it free?
We do invite customers in, but they're trade customers and they're free.
Okay, so I'll have to work out with legal whether that's licensable. When you make a supply to a trade customer in bulk, or these single bottles, these single bottles to retail customers, do you make that supply from the office? Is it picked up by the courier from the office, or do you make that supply from the storeroom?
That depends. Our address with the couriers is the office, and you know, to be honest, we can have the collection done from either. But
so a courier could pick up a supply from the storeroom and whiz it off to the customer.
Yeah, they could do. Yeah. but equally they could pick it up from the office door and take it off to the customer. I mean, they don't take it directly to the customer.
No,
they take it. They pick up all the bottles in one go, take them to their distribution hub, and then they send them on to all the different customers. So it's not like a point-to-point courier system, like a kind of Deliveroo type system. It takes 3 days for the bottles to reach.
I'll try and be quick then, because they're just basic clarification points. Do you supply only by bottle your spirits, or do you have spirits in these polyethylene type containers?
We do also have the spirits in these they're flexible pouches. Yeah.
Okay, and I think under certain circumstances, 40% alcohol can be an accelerant, as of course polyethylene can be as well.
I mean, at room temperature, I don't believe that's the case, but also the polyethylene can be. The laminate's principally nylon and polypropylene. It's got a very thin layer of polyethylene as a barrier.
Okay, I raise that because obviously fire is a great sensitivity to the residents. Talking about fire, as a company, presumably you have fire risk assessments for all your premises, both the office and for the storage. Would that be appropriate? Do you think you could offer something as a condition that you would submit as part of the license your fire risk assessments that you have carried out as a business?
Yeah, we have submitted them to the council as our landlord.
Yeah, but now to licensing as well. Yeah. I was going to come on to that.
We've got no problem submitting our fire risk assessment to licensing additionally, no.
Yeah, I was going to come on to the lease next. Your tenancy agreement for both the office space and the storage space, presumably both of those are clear with the landlord that you can use the premises for storage of alcohol in one case, and then the other supply of alcohol as an off sale and tastings, and the landlord is quite happy with both of those uses in your current lease.
That's my understanding of it correctly. There's nothing in the lease preventing us from doing that. And
as part of, if we were minded
and we discussed what our activities were before we took the lease.
If we were minded to grant this, as part a condition would be that you would have to supply, you know, that proof from your landlord that the landlord was happy this was part of your lease. And then finally, planning use. If the office has a planning use as an office only, does it also have a legal planning use as a showroom for tastings and for storage of a limited number of containers of alcohol?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Finally, when you say it's a small amount in the office, which is what you're applying for, basically, would you be prepared to have a condition, put a cap on the amount of alcohol that you could store in the office?
That would depend upon the cap.
Okay. I mean, what would be a reasonable amount?
In principle, we wouldn't object. No.
No. I mean, you're not intending to use the whole office as another warehouse.
No. I mean, our intentions are to get to a point where we can get enough business to move to a fulfillment center.
Yeah.
So this is just a step in the. This is just a step in. Like, we can't use a fulfillment center because we don't have enough volume to get reasonable rates from them. So we have to build our volume up in order to be able to go to a fulfillment center with a track record of how many parcels we send, and only then can they start doing it.
What do you think might be a reasonable amount of alcohol to be stored in the office?
100 bottles.
Yeah. Okay, and then my final question on this bit is, you want your off license for retail sales to operate between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. But what about deliveries to the premises and collections to be sent out from the premises? What would the same hours apply?
Well, those are typically the hours that the collection would occur.
Because I think if we were minded to grant it, we'd want to put limits on the hours, because this is a residential area.
Yeah, I understand that. Just a little point on the actual fulfillment process is that the people who are collecting our parcels are also delivering to residents in Hazelwood Tower at the same time. Like, they're not different vehicles. So Steve, the Hermes driver, he's at the property every day making deliveries to the residents. While he's making deliveries to residents, he's also can pick up from us. Yeah, up to a point we can specify. I mean, we've specified our collection should occur between 3 and 4 p.m. We're not 100% in control of when the collection actually happens due to kind of traffic and kind of planning. But we're at the premises during office hours, so we're there from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. So it by definition will not occur when we're not present, and we're only there Monday to Friday. So we're not keeping antisocial hours in that respect. Does that make sense?
Okay, so there will be hours put on this, and I think you're suggesting 10 till 6.
That's when we're in the office, yes. So we certainly wouldn't accept anything beyond that, because we wouldn't be able. There's no one at the office then.
Yeah. Last question: the protection of minors. If you're making e-sales, off sales. At the point of delivery to the customer, I know you have checks on the ID and the age of the customer when they place the order, but what check does the courier make with the challenge 25 with the customer?
The courier is supposed to only deliver the parcel to the named the name of the person who purchased it.
Does the courier make an age check or ask to see ID?
The courier won't know what's in the parcel, so they don't make an age check, no.
Do they ask for an ID check?
I don't believe they do, no.
Is that something that you could put in your contract with the courier?
We could request it.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I just jump in here quickly? We are actually in the process of switching to a new courier who have a specialised alcohol delivery service, and we can stipulate that they request ID from the customer. So we are actually in the process of changing. And if a premises license was granted, by the time it was granted, we would already be using that new courier. So we could actually do that. I believe Royal Mail don't as standard practice, but certainly the majority of our deliveries will not be Royal Mail. They will be with a courier that does have an alcohol delivery service, a specialised alcohol delivery service.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, Chairman, for your patience with all my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got some more questions.
Okay, Judith, I'll just turn to you in a minute. I'm just going to ask my own questions and then come back to you as well. That was helpful. Thank you, Councillor Spalding. And then also we will be turning to the objectors as well, who will, I'm sure, have some questions to ask. So Mr. Hill and Mr. Cook, we obviously understand the situation many businesses are in with COVID and having to change how you operate. So we are aware of that. But and thank you for outlining your business. And again, I'm pleased to hear that you are, trying to support sustainable businesses as well with your eco credentials again, which we are trying to encourage as well. But as I'm sure you can completely understand, the fire issue is a huge sensitivity here, and in this location in particular. So that for me is my main concern, and I really need to get to the bottom of this. And you say you have been visited 10 to 20 times by the fire brigade and council officers, and you're mindful of safety. But I really want to kind of dig into that a bit more and to find out what the records of these, and if we were minded to award this license, what extra steps will you put in place, and how can we be sure that everything is safe? Thank you.
We've done everything that we can think of at the moment already. To some extent we're in a situation where if the experts ask us to do something, we'll do our best to comply with that. Is there anything specifically that you had in mind that you'd like us to do?
Well, I think I'd like to see an updated visit and a report of that visit. I would also like to see limits on the actual spirit stored. I think you've been very clear about the mixers and versus the wine, which would obviously put fire out because they are liquid. And I understand we are in an odd situation, committee here, and we need to be mindful of this, that we can only look at the licensable activities. And if we have an issue regarding the storage, even if we did not grant this license, my understanding is that storage of alcohol could still happen there, regardless of what we say. And that's something that it looks as if the lease, the freeholder would have to take up, but that's something, again, we can pursue. So I suppose my main things is that another visit, another risk assessment, and a record of that, and then a cap on the actual quantity. And would you be okay with that if we were minded to approve, I suppose, is my question to you, Mr. Hill.
Again, that would depend upon what was regarded as a reasonable quantity. If it was going to be 6 bottles of spirits, that wouldn't be acceptable to us.
You've mentioned 100 bottles. I think you said to Councillor Spalding.
That's for the storeroom. That's for the office. In the storeroom, we'd keep more than 100 bottles. We'd need to. Economically, we can't operate by having a case delivered to us, a single case, and in order to send out 6 bottles at once.
Now I understand. So a pallet, you could take a delivery of a pallet to your storeroom and then distribute that as and when you get the online.
Yeah, we're happy to only take single pallet deliveries. To be honest, we don't actually take single pallet deliveries typically. We take quarter pallet deliveries. So although a delivery will come on a pallet, the pallet won't be fully loaded, as it were. But yeah, the total quantity of spirits, we're happy for it to be such as would fit on a single standard pallet.
Okay.
We can define that in more specifically as required.
Yeah, perhaps maybe in litre quantity or something. Okay, understood. Thank you very much. Councillor Blakeman, I understand you have more questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I'd like to ask about the 3 letters from the residents. 2 of them were typed up by the Sustainable Spirit Company and signed by people whose first language probably was not English. Are you content that they understood what they were signing?
I am. I mean, one of the residents is English, actually.
Yeah. Well, that's the one with the who submitted his own.
No, two of the three residents who submitted, two are English. English is their first language. The third, English may not be his first language, but he speaks English absolutely fluently.
Okay, right.
In fact, he even said that he has a collection of vintage whiskies that he'd like us to perhaps find a buyer for.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. My second question relates to your lease. I think you will understand our concerns that the lease was granted by the TMO back in 2012 and not by the freeholder. So would you be, I mean, I think Councillor McVeigh touched on this. Are you content that we revert to the freeholder and do ask for reassurance that they are happy that alcohol is stored in the premises?
My understanding is that the lease was not granted by the TMO, it was granted by the landlord.
Yes, but that was before the Grenfell fire, not after. That's the issue concerning us. So are you content that we just reconfirm that statement with the freeholder?
The freeholder is the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, and they're the people who granted us the lease. It wasn't the TMO.
Yes, but the lease was granted pre-Grenfell is the issue. So I think we need to reconfirm with the council that they are content that flammable liquids like spirits are stored underneath one of their tower blocks.
A small quantity of non-flammable room temperature liquids, including a large quantity, equally large quantity of fire retardant liquids.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they'll go into that detail when we ask them.
I understand that the situation in regard fire safety, which has always been a concern to us, is a much more public concern after the Grenfell tragedy.
Yes. Can you tell me when your lease expires?
So the lease expires. We're on a rolling lease. So it has no current end. Okay,
thank you. And can you tell me who collects your refuse?
We use the recycling bins behind the building.
No, but you presumably have a commercial.
We don't create to any extent a large amount of waste.
Sorry, I'm a bit confused here. As a business, you should have an arrangement with a commercial company to collect your refuse. Are you saying that you put it out with the residents' refuse?
We use we only create recycling waste. That's the bulk paper from the office and so on, and we put it in what we assumed were the communal recycling bins.
Right, so you use the residents' refuse collection, you haven't got a.
Well, I thought as an occupant of the building, we were also entitled to use these.
I think we need to clarify that.
Is that strictly relevant to the license application?
Well, yeah, because we normally, sometimes we do specify what time refuse should be collected because of possible disturbance to residents.
Right. So no, we don't leave bags out for independent collection.
Okay. Right.
So we never leave rubbish out on the street. For, as you might see, in waiting for a first mile or a private contractor to collect.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's all my questions now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blakeman. I just want to clarify one more. Actually, no, I'll go to the objectives, and then if there's any clarification afterwards, we can always come back. So, Councillor Mason, would you please like to ask any questions? This is just questions. Remember, you will have your time to do your submission, as you know, afterwards. Thank you.
The committee's asked so many questions. You haven't left many for us to cover, because I was going to cover some of those. But good morning.
We're being very thorough. We're being very thorough.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes, you are. One of the more thorough committees I've been in front of. Mr. Hill, yes, good morning. You mentioned the unfair characterization of your business as illegally trading, and I hope you understand the confusion that was. If there was confusion with you and the officers, that was certainly going to be transmitted to the objectors and the residents. I mean, if we go to page 26 on Appendix D, we see on the 1st of December 2019, the officers. Trading officers were advised, it says here, that no alcohol was kept on the site, that the premises were an office, where orders were taken, etc., etc. And then when they went back on the 31st of March, officers visited 2nd of April 2020 and spoke to Mr. Hill, who confirmed that he was now dispatching alcohol from the site to members of the public. And it says, I know you dispute this, but it says warning letter issued with a subsequent email advising that the premises license should be applied for. Of course, I think in your submission you said you thought you didn't need a premises license but applied for it anyway. So so the question is, do you think that the officers got it completely wrong, that they misunderstood what was happening? Because if they did, obviously, that's been transmitted down to the residents, to me, to the committee. What do you think? How do you think this confusion happened? Even if you didn't think that you needed a premises license, you applied for one.
No, the officers were very clear on the visit on the 2nd of April. And I discussed our understanding with them, and they said, we should apply to be compliant. So we did apply.
Why do you think they wrote that? You see that there, warning letter issued by what they said a warning letter was issued.
We never received a warning letter.
You didn't. You didn't receive one. So
we didn't receive a subsequent email either.
Yeah, but of course you understand that residents, whoever read that was taking that as gospel coming from trading standards officers. On the issue
they weren't trading standards officers. They were members of the council licensing team.
Sorry, I stand corrected, licensing team. But if they wrote that, then of course whoever read that from the outside would assume that officers were getting it right. That they weren't supplying incorrect information. On the residents' contacts, you said that, of course, you were mindful of local residents, and of course, all businesses probably should be. Did you ever attend any residents' association meeting? Say, can I have 10 minutes just to explain what's happening now this month with my company, or to explain away any of the issues that you may have heard? Obviously, you must have contacted residents because you got 3 letters, but there were, of course, I must say there are 78 flats in the tower. But what contact do you actually have with residents? Because I'm sure they would welcome you coming to a meeting for 10 minutes, which they have, or before COVID, they had them fairly regularly, about every 8 weeks, I believe.
We've never been invited to a residents' meeting. Like, we don't have access to the main entrance to Hazelwood Tower. So we're unaware of any notice boards, or we don't have any opportunities to put any notice boards up. Residents do come into our premises on a reasonably frequent basis. Partly, sometimes just to say hello. So we, in general, we are on good terms. We didn't want to canvass the entire building. We just wanted to give an example, to show that the way we characterised by the objections is not shared by every resident of Hazelwood Tower.
Well, I'm sure not, but
we'd be initially we were approached, to be honest, quite hostilely regarding our activities, which has been quite stressful, and it's been I'm not sure what the right word is, but members of my staff have been approached in an aggressive way and have been quite traumatized by it, to be quite honest. we feel a bit sort of put upon, to put it frankly.
I'm sure we'll come to that later in submissions, but I would just say now that these issues are fairly common across, especially in North Kensington, where there are tower blocks and there are businesses below or nearby. The residents are very, very sensitive and also traumatized, sensitive to these issues. It's not just you, and it's not just this tower or these two towers. In terms of the fire, would be my final question. You, of course, you discussed you'd been visited 10 or 20 times to by the fire brigade or by the council. Do you understand why residents or even councillors would not find it at the moment credible or find it, or would not want to give credibility to anything that the TMO or the council had said with regard to fire assessments? Do you understand why they would distrust anyone saying, my fire assessment was done by the TMO or the council? Do you understand that?
I do understand it, and we conducted our fire risk assessment independently of the TMO,
which we haven't got, of course.
I did submit it in the documents.
You've got it in the documents.
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah. Okay. Some of us have got a view.
And I did submit. I mean, it was submitted to the council as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, same thing. Okay. We'll come back at the. I'll come back at submission. Otherwise, I'll be moving into submission area. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason. That was very, very useful questions, and I think particularly about the RA meetings, and perhaps we could come on to that later, because I think that is crucial. I mean, as I'm sure everyone can imagine, as a committee we hear lots of incidences with businesses and residents, and we always try to make sure that the two communicate as best as possible, because everyone has to kind of try to operate and live side by side in this very densely populated borough. And thank you again, Councillor Mason, for putting it into context about how we have businesses in residential areas all the time. So much appreciated. And if we could please move on to Mr. Turner, would you like to ask any questions? Again, you will have a chance to do your submission in a few moments.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Morning.
Hi. Yeah, first thing I'd like to ask about the quantities of alcohol stored in the storage area. There's no inventory that's been supplied by Mr. Hill concerning the storage area. So, and also there's 2 deliveries a day that arrive. Now, why would he need 2 deliveries a day if large quantities of alcohol aren't being delivered? And also there's an 11-ton truck that arrives and delivers a pallet. Taking into account that this storage unit was never, it never had commercial, originally when the building was designed, it was never a commercial unit. There's no designated parking area. And like I've stated previously, it's very close to a children's play area, next to the bike park. And there's an 11-ton truck that arrives, delivers pallets. So that will need a tail lift truck. They would need a pallet truck to deliver the pallets itself. And also Mr. Hill's mentioned that the quantities of alcohol stored are safe and modest and moderate. I mean, how can a pallet of alcohol be a sample amount of alcohol?
So what's the specific question you'd like me to answer?
About the delivery.
Why? Sorry.
Sorry, I'm just going to intervene here. I think the questions, Mr. Hill, was specifically 2 delivery trucks and 11-ton trucks initially. If you could just comment on that, please.
So the 2 deliveries a day is is factually incorrect. Like, we don't have 2 deliveries a day, and on one day we might have had 2 deliveries, but that could equally have been 1 delivery of alcohol and 1 delivery of, say, for example, promotional glasses, or it might have been Amazon delivering some paper for our printer, or any number of non-licensable deliveries. And then the second issue regarding the 11-ton truck, like, we have 1 delivery typically every fortnight, which brings our stock from one of our warehouses. That is the single delivery that's carried out by a lorry.
We keep a
and we
record
take
of all
great
of the
care
deliveries as well.
when it's delivered.
Yeah, I mean, are there delivery notes available? I mean, could that be?
We have delivery notes and records, yeah.
Right. Okay.
In order to submit in order to get a delivery, we have to submit a purchase order to our warehouse. So everything, you know, if it's required, can be shown. So we have a purchase order for every single palletized delivery received, and on average it tends to be between 1 every 2 weeks, 1 every 1.5 weeks. Yeah.
And my question about the quantities of alcohol. I mean, have you got an inventory, a stock take of the alcohol that's stored there? And why hasn't that been supplied?
So yeah, we keep we do a monthly stock take, and you know, why it hasn't been supplied. Like, there are some limits to how many documents we believe we should be required as an independent business to supply.
I mean,
and who we should supply those documents to.
Right, but surely this is quite a critical point, because it's, you know, I'm questioning the amount of alcohol that's stored in that room, and that would be quite easily cleared up by providing the inventory.
Well, we're, you know, if the licensing team wants us to submit our monthly inventories, we're happy for that to be a condition of the granting of the license.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Mr. Turner, more questions?
Yes. Also, by reading through your actual license, it was to my understanding that you want to consume alcohol on the premises. Is that not correct?
No, we don't want to.
I got that confused somehow, because on the license itself, it said that there's no alcohol consumed on the premises, but you've been saying that there's tasting that takes place in the office.
No, we're not retailing for consumption on the premises.
I'm just going to jump in here, if I may, and just clarify this point, because in fact, I think also, could someone put their microphone on mute? We're getting lots of feedback. A minute, please. Mr. Turner, we'll come back to you. Thank you. I'm just going to actually turn to our legal advice here, because I know Councillor Spalding mentioned this earlier about the definition of if you're having someone in to have a drink or if you're having someone in to sell them a drink. So perhaps, Lindsay Lemazurier, could you please just clarify that for us about what is a licensable activity, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The licensable activity is sale by retail of alcohol, so there has to be a sale element involved. So having tastings not for sale wouldn't be a licensable activity.
Right, so understood. Just like someone can drink alcohol in their own premises.
Correct.
A license, understood. Okay, and Mr. Turner, do you have any more questions? And remember, you are going to do your submission any minute now, but if you have any specific questions.
I do. Sorry, Mr. Hill has stated in communication with the RBKC that they've had 2 visits from the fire brigade, and then today in his statement he said that he's had 10. Now, there's no documentation to say that the fire brigade have visited. There's no fire risk assessments done by the fire brigade, And in fact, what I find really worrying, when I visited the local fire station, they had information on this building. They knew about vulnerable residents. They knew about hoarders, but they had no idea about the storage of alcohol in the base of the building. So I think that's really concerning, because obviously, you know, there is alcohol stored in there. You would never know it from outside the door. There's no sign saying that there's flammable liquid stored within the room. So I find that quite concerning, because obviously it's paramount that, you know, fire safety is followed.
So from the question about how many times we've been visited, certainly me personally, I have probably let in 7 or 8 different groups of people. Often, I can't exactly remember how they identified themselves, but I believe that they were from the fire service. And I mean, I've personally seen about 30 different people come in, have a look around, and were then satisfied. But, you know, it's quite hard, to be honest. You know, they don't keep a record of it. That's not really our lookout. And similarly, we don't keep a record of it. We just felt like we would comply, and we did. And at no point have we ever, you know, not let anyone in. So if someone came to our door and identified themselves as from the fire service, which they have on multiple occasions, I know when Mr. Hill wrote 2 times, I think he was referring to his own, how many times he'd personally let the fire service into our storeroom. But then subsequently we spoke, and I told him that, because he was away for a month or 2, and I personally let in so many people. It was around a year, you know, 9 months ago, I guess, a year ago, when pretty much every week there would be someone new or a different group of people who'd come in and inspect the storeroom. And then on the flammable sign, we don't have a flammable sign on the door. That's true. As far as I'm aware, it's not a legal requirement to have it, because it's not actually classed as hazardous. I'd need to check that, but as far as I'm aware, we're not legally obliged to have a flammable sign on our door.
Thank you for that reply. Mr. Turner, could you please turn your microphone on mute, because every time someone speaks, we hear them speaking through your computer as well. Thank you. I wonder if we could just turn to our legal advice here about that exact question about flammable notices, because again, I would have thought if that was the case, every single pub would have to have a flammable notice on it. But perhaps we're straying into the another legal area in terms of fire risk assessment rather than a licensable assessment. But I'm sure you can understand why they are all linked. So, Ms. Maria.
That's correct, Chairman. We are straying into fire safety regulations. It's not something that will be covered by Licensing Act 2003.
Okay, right. But as this is an issue and a concern for the committee, if we were minded to grant this license, we would have to be looking at that regulation and seeing how we can incorporate it into the condition, perhaps.
We have no problem with a flammable sign on our door. You know, it's no skin off our nose to have that.
Therefore, we can add it as a condition if the applicant's happy to put a sign up, even though it is generally under fire risk legislation. But if the applicant's happy to put a sign on the door, then I don't see any reason why we can't add it as a condition.
Sure. Again, it's like.
Sorry, would that not make residents very worried?
I think this whole issue about the fire and the alcohol, we need to get advice probably from the fire services about this, and this goes back to my original question about having a new fire risk assessment relevant to the particular levels of stock being stored, and I think that may well cover all these different aspects which Mr. Turner and Councillor Mason and the committee have raised. So I think we're going to move on to the objectors case now, if that's okay, and we can still ask questions there. So Councillor Mason, are you okay to do your submission now? You have 10 minutes. Oh, I have a notice from Mr. Phelan. Mr. Paul, would you like to comment on something?
Yes, Councillor, if that's okay. I wrote to the London Fire Authority, the responsible authority in terms of premises licence applications, on the 3rd of July, and I invited them for further comment in terms of the application, just as a sort of precautionary matter. They essentially raised no issues again, and that their precise wording is that they've spoken to the inspecting officer, who advised that if you consider there to be a licensing issue, then the council would need to investigate it. They decline to add any further comments to their initial no representation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you for being proactive and seeking that further information on July the 3rd. That is very helpful. And perhaps if you have a copy of that, could you share that with the committee?
I can, most certainly. If you give me a moment, I'll scan it through and I'll send it over. One moment.
Thank you very much. We'll come back to and we'll look at that when that comes through. And meanwhile, Councillor Mason, are you okay to do your submission, please?
Yes, Chair. By the way, I'd also be interested to see that LFB paper, because quite often they issue statements without actually having done any of the assessment work. You'll understand what I mean. The only reason that I submitted an objection is to settle this issue once and for all, because not just the last 2 years, but over the last 3 or 4 years, wherever the issues that are raised here regarding these premises pop up at meetings, they pop up from residents, and not just from Mr. Turner, from other residents who won't raise their heads above the parapet, because people in North Kensington are quite loath to raise their heads above the parapet sometimes. And I thought, if the committee hears all the issues and decides how a premises license should be granted, if that's what you wish to do, you've covered all the issues, that the conditions are set, and that therefore I, as a councillor, or anybody else, can say to anybody anywhere, this was considered by a committee, and this is what they decided, and they considered all of those issues, the ones that you're just talking about now, to me, Mr. or Mrs. Resident. So the committee have covered a lot of the issues, particular Councillor Blakeman and Spalding and the chair, and I'm not going to rehash all of those issues, because some of those can be conditioned or considered, and I hope you will. And I covered some of those in the questions in my my objection, particularly with regard to fire. Of course, the committee can't specifically deal with fire, but fire is a big issue, and people imagine that alcohol is flammable. That's what they believe, because quite often programs tell them on the BBC and otherwise that alcohol is flammable, that you can run vehicles off it and so on, vehicle engines and so on. So it was really to put this thing to bed. And in terms of some of the other objections, because there is Sue Duggins also put in an objection, and she is the outgoing chair of the Two Towers Residents Association. But some of the comments that were made about Darren Turner, well, I think some of the background to this is that this was a tower with 7 drug houses in it over many years, one next door to Darren. And if he doesn't mind me saying this, Darren is a traumatized individual. He gave evidence and made statements for the Metropolitan Police and for the council many times to his own danger. He was attacked. I think he was hospitalized on one occasion. He was threatened with death on many occasions, and he stood up against those people who were drug dealing and got rid of at least 5 drug houses from that tower. And he took on the TMO who were not doing an array of repairs and maintenance stuff, and a lot of it was to do with fire safety, doors, lights that were not fixed, fire doors that didn't work. He took the TMO on with those issues, and the context of this is that these premises were just one of those issues, because no one was actually doing anything. But to give him his due, this man actually stood up and in court, and in North Kensington, you do not talk to the police, and you do not give evidence in court, but he did it. So he is suffering from that even today. So maybe that's the background to some of the issues that were raised with regard to him. But I'll be happy if no one wants to hurt this business. We have got other businesses in similar situations in other premises, as in densely populated areas. As I mentioned, I have one in my over in my own ward. I won't mention the name of it, but for 27 years it's been in contest with residents. So if the licensing committee can come up with a cast iron license, if that's what you wish to do, I would not want to be asking these premises to be closed. But there seems to be definitely confusion over the status of the license. If the trading standards officers and the license and Mr. Hill didn't were confused, were being confused, as it were, because we can see from the complaints page that we were all reading that he contends that the situation was not as was written there. The fire issue is a big issue because residents are very, very sensitive to that sort of thing. We've had fires in the adjoining tower of Adair Tower, not because of businesses or alcohol, but people are after Grenfell are alerted. They are what's the word I'm looking for? It's in their blood. They see danger in all of these issues. With regard to the residents, contact with residents where there is contact seem, because I attend the meetings throughout the years. I've been a councillor for 28 years now. I've been a member of this committee for 25 years. And I've been to meetings where licensees and premises holders have popped in for 10, 20 minutes to tell them about something they're doing. This is a license we're going to do. Can we discuss this with you? We've heard these complaints. We've received these letters from the council licensing department because of complaints. Could perhaps we'll just tell you what we're, and they appreciate that. And you may get some kickback from one or two residents, but generally people are more. They feel that you've at least come and told them what's happening, and quite often it means you don't have to attend hearings like this because people get to know you. They know more people than three from 78 get to know you, and quite often it's that contact that is missing. And of course people are very busy running their businesses. I understand that, not least during this COVID period, but it is still useful. So sort of to conclude, because you have covered a lot of the issues, and I hope you can take some of those issues into account, the ones you can legally take into account, and condition the ones that you can condition if you are minded to grant this premises license, and sort of deal with the fire safety issues that have been raised, because even although, as I've stated earlier, the TMO stroke the council may have assessed these premises, no one has had any credibility whatsoever in the TMO to with regard to fire safety, and we will see the sort of fire safety assessments that were done with regard to Grenfell trotted out in the inquiry, and we will then understand why we shouldn't. So if the committee can make a definitive decision on all of these different issues, and put it under license, then I as a local councillor will be confident to tell residents any future meeting, because I do attend those meetings, even if licensees don't, I'll be content to tell them that this is what the licensing committee decided, and that they looked at all of these different issues that the residents may raise with me, and that these premises are as fire safe and as well controlled and operated otherwise. So yes, I did make an objection. I'm more content now with some of the answers that I've heard. Some of the objections I made were under the misapprehension that the licensable activity was what it seems to be proved to be not. So I wouldn't sustain my objection on these on these grounds. I'm quite happy to withdraw the objection if the committee is minded to condition the areas that you have mentioned that you were conditioned, that I won't elongate the meeting by rehashing. So thank you, Chair. I will finish now.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. That again was incredibly helpful, putting everything into context, and I do appreciate also what you've shared with us about some of the awful issues that Mr. Turner has had to go through with the drug dens and everything. So I am sorry to hear about all that, and thank you also for offering about the being a liaison with the residents' associations. But again, that might be something we may, if we are minded to grant, look at conditioning about some form of regular liaison resident groups between the applicant and the residents. But once again, thank you very much, Councillor Mason. And Mr. Turner, you have up to 10 minutes, please, if you'd like to do your submission. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, thank you. Basically, you know, I've been a resident in Hazelwood Tower since '97, and the experiences of Grenfell have left me traumatised. I experienced, you know, horrendous things. Having the alcohol stored at the base of this building is an additional risk. Having the deliveries to and from the property are an additional risk. It was never, this building was designed, it was never meant to be a commercial unit having these deliveries. It's a high density area, a residential area. It's adjacent to a play area, which is really well used throughout the day. And it's a real concern to me that you know, that this company operates from the base of the building and storing alcohol, which is a risk, and it is a flammable material. It's a concern to me as well that there were fire risk assessments done on the 26th, which didn't actually include this property. In fact, it states that this room was unknown, so that's a concern. Yeah, another thing, the Mr. Hill states that this is a bonded room, but the door, when he operates, whenever a member of staff operates in this room, they keep the door open. You can see directly into the room. There's alcohol stored across the threshold of the door, which is a risk in itself. And the door isn't a fire door. And basically, I just think it's really unsafe it being there. It's an unnecessary risk.
Thank you. Do you have anything else you wish to add? No?
No, I think that's fine. I think that sort of covers it, really.
No, that's great. And now we're going to turn to Councillor Judith Blakeman, or Councillor Malcolm Spalding, for questions. If you want to do generic questions, but it generally helps when there's two objectors to actually say who you would actually like to answer your question. Judith, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, I'll start. So can I ask Councillor Mason? I do know the area, and I wondered if he can confirm my recollection that the previous use of these premises was as a sort of clothes shop. I
think the clothes shop was is that the one in front of Trellick as opposed to Hazelwood?
Can I interject? Yeah,
yes.
It used to be a clothing shop. There was a guy, Andrew, who run a clothing label as independent. That was in the office space, but he didn't have access to the storage area.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
he was a great tenant. We never had any issues with him in regards of fire safety, whereas we do with this company.
Yeah, that's right. He's right. I remember now.
Can I just interject quickly here? Although the residents may not have had issues with fire safety, I knew Andrew Eby as well. The convenience store, the shop was called, and the fire risk posed by the flammable polymers in the clothes is actually greater than the risk posed by the potable alcohol that we store.
So I rest my case with the TMO then.
Well, sorry, I mean, I have great sympathy for the Sustainable Spirit Company because they received a license from the TMO. I am still not convinced that the council were fully apprised of the terms of that lease. But I would like to ask Mr. Turner, what floor do you live on in Hazelwood Tower?
I'm on the 9th floor.
The 9th floor, okay. And I would like to ask both of you whether you've actually received copies of the recent fire risk assessments of Trellick Tower.
No.
No.
Tower?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. Trellick.
No, sorry, Hazelwood Tower.
No, definitely not Hazelwood, no.
No. Okay, Mr. Turner, have you received a copy of the most recent fire risk assessment?
I have, yes, and most worrying, this room is not mentioned. In fact, the commercial properties are left out of the risk assessment.
Okay.
And the storage area is marked as unknown. And sure, you know, my concern is obviously it does have alcohol stored in that room. Surely it's of more importance to have a fire risk assessment that contains the whole building and you know, draws attention to alcohol being stored in that room. So it's a concern to me.
That is something we could take up with housing management.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, yeah. Okay, I think that's all my questions at the moment. I might think of more.
Can I just interject here regarding the risk assessment? So I'm not sure, there's a risk assessment available online through the council's website for Hazelwood Tower, but it's quite out of date. I think it refers to 2018, and the council have subsequently, the housing team have subsequently received our risk assessment, having asked for it, knowing that it was missing from the original fire risk assessment for the building.
So, sorry, you've assessed yourselves rather than getting the council to do it.
That's correct. We assessed ourselves with the guidance of a fire safety consultant.
Can I interject here?
At our own expense.
There was a fire risk assessment carried out by Turner and Townsend on the 26th of June this year. And that was the risk assessment that didn't include the commercial property, and the storage area was marked as unknown. That was on the 26th of last month.
Thank you. And can we just clarify that? So, Mr. Hill, you did a separate one. You are not Turner and Townsend?
No, that's not correct. I mean, I think it's like largely down to who pays for the risk assessment. So we're obliged to do our own risk assessments as part of the terms of our lease. So we were never contacted or consulted about this other risk assessment, and indeed we've never been contacted in advance about any of the visits by the London Fire Brigade or the council. So we've been in a difficult situation. People just turn up at our door and demand to be given access. And as Mr. Cook mentioned, we're not talking about a single occurrence here. We're talking about a relentless stream.
Chair, if I could interject, I was always told over the years, and not just for these premises, but when fire risk assessments are done for, say, that tower, it does not include commercial properties, which I was always told, both by the Fire Brigade and the then TMO, they are responsible for doing their own, I was always told, and I found that to be not referring at all to the Sustainable Drinks Company. I always found that in principle to be difficult, something difficult to swallow, but apparently that's the law.
Thank you for clarifying that. And I think Councillor Blakeman mentioned that this might be something we need to take up actually as a council, because I know everything comes under so many different regulations, but if we are trying to stop this siloing that's happening, I know it is separate from the Licensing Act, but perhaps just in terms of best practice, we need to do better in terms of joining up these residential risk assessments and then the business risk assessments. And Mr. Hill, can you please share your own fire risk assessment that you did on advice of the fire safety consultant with the licensing team, please. Thank you. Councillor Spalding, have you got any questions, please, to the objectors?
Yes, just one brief question to Mr. Turner and to Councillor Mason. Really, to underline this as much as I can, that this committee is acutely aware of the sensitivity of Grenfell and people who have been affected by Grenfell. I was vice chair of Grenfell Recovery, so I've met hundreds of people who have been affected by this, who have the council's full attention. This licensing committee can only apply the Licensing Act 2003, I think that's correct. And when it comes to fire risk assessment and health and safety and landlord and tenant and leases and planning, even planning issues, this council, this committee can't stray into those areas because we can only apply licensing law. And so what we're going to do, I hope Mr. Turner, my question is that Mr. Turner and Councillor Mason, I hope you do appreciate, we are going to push the boundaries on this as far as we can to make sure that all those other acts of parliament and other laws and other procedures are as fully tested, but we have no power over them because we only consider licensing. But we are going to have to alert the landlord, we're going to have to alert fire brigade, we're going to have to alert planning, and we're going to have to alert the council as doing its housing fire assessment to embrace the fire risk assessment of this company, which has been done separately. The company itself is responsible for its own premises and its own fire risk, but obviously the council's got to take that into the protection of the residents. So I hope you do appreciate we shall do our utmost to involve all these other bodies.
And a question? Did you have a question, Councillor Spalding?
Well, that is the question to Councillor Mason and Mr. Turner, that I hope that you do appreciate our hands are slightly tied, but we're going to do our utmost that we can to involve all these other bodies.
Well, as a member of the committee myself, of course, I understand entirely the committee's the limit of the committee's remit, but I appreciate the offer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Spalding. I think part of my concern is the self-regulation of these areas.
You're on mute.
Stay on mute.
Sorry, I keep turning that off. Thank you for that. Mr. Phelan, on the screen you have that letter. I'm afraid I can't really read it. It's a bit small for me. Ah, thank you. So this is the one you were referring to in July. Thank you. That's very helpful. So can everyone read that and just see? I'll just read it out. Thank you for your email. I've now spoken to an inspecting officer who advised that if you consider there to be a licensing issue, then the council would need to investigate. If that then reveals there to be a fire safety offence, then please report it to us. Right, so we will discuss this as a committee and find out how that can be incorporated. And I'm aware I haven't asked either objector a specific question, but I think it's all been covered. And I think it's both incredibly helpful to hear how aware that both objectors are of the need for businesses, but the need for responsible operators and residents' concern. And we all seem to be focusing, rightly so, on the fire aspect of it. So thank you. Now, if I could just turn, I think the applicants may have a few questions for the objectors. Mr. Hill, Mr. Cook.
I have a question for Mr. Turner. It does seem like the majority of his objections seem to be around fire safety, which is, understandable given the circumstances. If we were to jump through any of the hoops that the fire service were to give us and we complied with them, if they were to audit our office, our storeroom, given that, would Mr. Turner then feel like he would be ready to have perhaps a more constructive relationship with us? Because certainly over the years, I mean, at first it was we were wouldn't say friendly, but we were we'd say hello to each other. And over the years, it's definitely got toxic. So I think the question is just to Mr. Turner's if he would be willing to kind of patch things up with us if he was satisfied that we'd done what was necessary to prove that our actions aren't in fact endangering the residents of Hazelwood Tower.
Okay, hi, Mr. Hill. With regards to the toxic relationship, as you refer to, when you first started operating in the
it's Mr. Cook. It's Mr. Cook actually, but
oh, sorry. Yeah, when you first started operating at the base of the building, I was particularly friendly with you, and I actually called Mr. Hill up when you had an attempted break-in. It's only over the years when you've consistently dumped your bulk rubbish, the pallets, etc., which has been clarified and confirmed by the caretaker, who constantly has to undertake removing your pallets. And it's only since I've noticed, and other residents have noticed and been really concerned, that a member of your staff smokes within the room where the alcohol has been stored, and continue to do so after no smoking signs were put up. And this has been confirmed in writing by the caretaker. It's been confirmed by Sue Duggan, who also witnessed this. And the toxic relationship, as you said, only came about after my reporting of your member of staff smoking in this area. So it's sort of deteriorated since then.
Both parties, I'm just going to intervene here for a moment, if I may, and appreciate that quite often, as I know Councillor Mason is aware, he's sat on the committee 25 years, and I know Judith Blakeman has as well, and Councillor Spalding, I believe. We're quite often in a position where we are in a kind of a mediation role. And while technically that isn't really our role, we always try to encourage it. And it's really helpful to have Councillor Mason on board as a party here and as an objector, because perhaps he could facilitate some kind of re-meeting of the parties, because the business, even if we didn't grant this license, would still stay there, and obviously the residents are still going to stay there. So we always try to kind of say if there can be some kind of rapprochement together would be very helpful. And my question, I suppose, is to Councillor Mason, just to see if he would be okay to try to facilitate some kind of meeting at some point after COVID.
I'm very happy to do that. In fact, it was something I was going to suggest. I've done it elsewhere, and it works reasonably. It works reasonably well, at least until new operators take over. Then you've got to redo the work. But of course, I'm even by email when I get emails complaining about X premises, and if I've got a decision from a licensing committee or some other decision, then I'll send it to them and say, this was decided by X committee. You may not like some of it, but we put representations in, some of your residents. So yes, I'm very happy to do that. And usually, as I said, I'll ask the particular premises if they would like to, having talked to the Residents Association, can they be invited for 10 or 15 minutes to just say, here, hello, this is us, we are from wherever, and begin the process. So I'm very happy to do that, and I can do that in this, and will do that in this situation.
That's greatly appreciated. Thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Hill or Mr. Cook, to either of the objectors?
Yeah, it's really a question, a statement really regarding the dumping of pallets. And again, I think there's unfortunately, a lot of the antisocial behaviour in the area is incorrectly attributed to the Sustainable Spirit Company. One of the photos in particular, was actually investigated by the housing team of, I think, 3 pallets against a brick wall, and they weren't our pallets. We had nothing to do with them, and yet I believe that the residents think perhaps that we were responsible for them. Furthermore, the pictures submitted of huge amounts of boxes being left at the bins. Again, this wasn't us. So I think, unfortunately, we've become a bit of a catch-all for a lot of anything that's wrong in the area. I've also got one suggestion that I wondered if Mr. Turner would see as potentially a positive way to go forwards, is that currently the bicycle hangar is immediately adjacent to our storeroom, which obviously creates a sort of point of both parties mixing and mingling frequently, as Mr. Turner's uses his bicycle frequently. If a location away from the storeroom suitable to the cyclist, I think when the building had its cladding removed, the bicycle hangar was moved to a location in the square to the other side of the building. I felt that actually diminished considerably this sort of area of congestion and potential kind of disagreement. I was wondering if that was something Mr. Turner might think was a positive idea.
Well, I mean, that's down to the council. I don't have any control over that. But going back to the pallets, it's been confirmed by the caretaker who works in this building every day, myself, and there's no other company here that has delivery on pallets. It's only yours. They are dumped by your company, unfortunately, as photograph evidence shows. So I'm afraid, trying to say that it's, attributed to your company when you haven't done this is untrue.
Chair, if I may interject on the tower, the tower was decladded over a year ago for obvious reasons, and the works are going to begin again fairly shortly. So it's quite possible. I don't know what the circumstances are, but it's quite possible that bicycle hangar may be moved again. If it was moved temporarily, it may be moved back to its original site. But Mr. Turner has got no control over what will happen. But no doubt that can be discussed with Doug Goldring, of course, the Director of Housing Management, who controls these contracts. So that whole area is under, and the two towers are under major, I don't know what to call it. It's not recladding. The outside, the retreating of the outside of the entire building. So if those bicycle lockers were moved temporarily, I assume that they will be moved back to where they came from, if that's more suitable for the business and for the residents. We shall see. You're muted, Chair. You're muted.
I'm sorry. I keep trying to keep on mute to stop the feedback, and then I forget to unmute. Apologies. Yes, and regarding the pallets, well, again, we can do a rubbish condition if we were minded to grant. But unfortunately, I do live in the area as well, that if some rubbish is dumped on the street, then other people tend to kind of dump theirs as well, right there too. Unfortunately. So we have no more questions from the committee or the applicants to the objectors. So we're now going to move on to going back to the licensing officers, Mr. Phelan and Ms. Dyball, to see if you have anything further you'd like to add, please. Mr. Phelan, are you trying to say something? Are you on mute, perhaps, like me, or is there nothing you want to say?
Sorry, that was me. It's Sharon Dyball. Just to confirm for the committee's benefit that fire safety matters in licensed premises do fall within the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order of 2005, and any conditions on a licence related to fire safety cannot be enforced by the licensing authority, as they do fall within the remit of the fire authority.
Thank you, Sharon. That's very helpful. But we can still put a condition on saying we wanted to see the fire authority's report or delegated officer's report into something, could we?
Yeah, sorry, can I interject? I mean, does that not contradict the Mr. Phelan's submission to the fire service?
No, it doesn't contradict it. They are a responsible authority for the purposes of the Licensing Act and for licensing applications. And as concerns had been raised relating to fire safety and we had not received any comments from them, we wrote them specifically to ask them and to let them know that there had been some concerns.
So the response is that the RBKC should follow it up, and I don't think they have.
Sorry, I might be able to clarify the follow-up from the council, essentially. So on the 6th of July, we received a message from the housing management team from an Elena Lebedeva. And what she essentially says is that we have carried out several visits to this property regarding complaints about the vodka and smoking in and around the premises. The fire officers are satisfied that there is no breach to the regs in terms of fire safety. The vodka is not flammable at room temperature, and there is sufficient compartmentation to contain a fire. They have also made a no smoking area outside the front of the premises. So that's a response in relation to the email we received from the fire authority.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Sorry, Judith. Who is that from?
Sorry,
that was from Social Investment and Property, a property project officer.
And can we see a copy of that, please?
Absolutely, certain. I'll scan that in now, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, Judith, what did you want to add?
Yeah, no, I said I wanted to see a copy of that. I am concerned that this probably won't allay the residents' fears.
Okay, well, we have to see what the letter says, and we will discuss that as a committee. Thank you for that. So, governance, anything else you want to add to this, please?
Nothing from governance, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And our legal, we're going to turn to our legal team, our licensing legal. Ms. Liz Missouri, would you have any questions you want to ask or any observations you wish to add at this point, please? Thank you.
I don't know if this is the correct point, but obviously at some point, if you are minded to grant, we'll need to discuss possible conditions, which I'd like to loosely run past the applicants. I don't know when you want to do that.
I think now would be a very good time. And can I just remind everybody that this is obviously if we were minded to grant. This is no guarantee that we will grant this licence. So that would be very helpful. And Mr. Hill and Mr. Cook, if you could just take a note of these as we go through them. It's also, well, you don't need to take a proper note, but just be clear what we are asking.
Okay, so the first one, I mean, they're just very loosely worded at the moment. We'd have to tighten up the wording. If the premises licence holder has a delivery service, obviously that's the courier service, then the premises licence holder shall operate a delivery policy which shall be adhered to at all times the premises are operating under the licence. It should contain a strategy on the attendance of couriers waiting to collect alcohol from the premises, so as not to cause a nuisance to neighbours, and a copy of the policy would be served on the licensing authority. And I think also within that strategy, you would need to have a Challenge 21 policy applied to ask the couriers to apply that policy when they're delivering to their customers. So are you comfortable with that?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, as I said before, certainly the main courier that we're going to use has that in place. We would need to look into it a little bit further as to exactly what is possible with various other couriers. At this point, I'm not sure exactly which ones offer the. You're referring to the identification at delivery
yes.
of the yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, we'd have to look into what's possible. I mean, certainly the main courier which we're planning on moving to, DPD, do offer such a service. But again, that is something which we'd have to look into.
But in principle, you're happy with that?
In principle, yes. It's just whether it is actually feasible, but in principle, yes.
Okay. Another one, this is more of a belts and braces approach. All sales of alcohol for consumption off the premises shall be in sealed containers only and not consumed on the premises. So that's obviously for sales. Are you happy with that?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't think that. We obviously will need a condition about rubbish, including wooden pallets and cardboard boxes, not to be deposited outside the premises between certain times. Obviously, that's for the councillors to decide. So would you be happy with obviously a condition limiting the times, and can you make any suggestions at this stage what you would consider to be acceptable? Just rubbish being deposited outside.
Pallets being left overnight, we consider it perfectly acceptable that pallets should not be left overnight outside the property.
Okay.
There's a slight misunderstanding here. We don't dump the pallets; they're actually collected.
Yes. But what time would you put them outside the premises?
Sorry, go on.
What time would you consider acceptable to put them outside the premises between, so we can consider your thoughts? Do you put them outside at all hours?
It's not really the time, it's for how long, I think, is the issue. So, I mean, we're happy to take not to have pallets, leave anything out there, out with our working hours. So, and during the weekend. So this is 10 a.m. to 6 p.m, Monday to Friday.
Okay, fine. And I mean, obviously you said that refuse collections, you don't have a commercial collection, you just rely on the residential collection at this stage.
Yeah, we try and, being a sustainable company, we've done our whole business revolves around reuse and minimizing waste. So we try and practice that in our business operations. So we don't generate much. And so, yeah, it goes through the buildings recycling.
Okay, so you don't have any control over the hours of collections. That's what I'm trying to get at, because it's not a commercial.
We have no control over the hours of collections.
Sorry, I'm just going to intervene here because I've just got up on the screen some of the conditions that Ms. Missouri is going through. It's all to do with if we do licenses, we do try to put on conditions, and it's generally to protect residents' amenity in terms of noise. Often for licensed premises, it's the clattering of bottles if they're on sales, off sales, and so we generally tend to say nothing can happen between the hours of midnight or 7 a.m, for example. But I think it sounds of you, because all of your hours would be office hours from 10 to 6. Is that correct? So regard to deliveries, etc., the other ones we're running through, it would be kind of your hours you'd be happy with is 10 to 6 and not at weekends. Is that my understanding?
That's correct, yes.
And Ms. Missouri, does that answer some of those other ones you're about to run through?
Yes, it does, for collections and deliveries, etc. I just wanted to be clear what hours they would like, and obviously what you would go away and consider. I think one of the other ones is just obviously no deliveries to take place unless a member of staff oversees the delivery, which I don't think is problematic. And also regarding the issue of the delivery vehicles parking across the emergency exit, where can the delivery vehicles pass that won't encroach on the emergency exit? Is there a specified area where they can park? Mr. Hill?
There's no specified area, no. There's some single yellow lines, so we advise the couriers to park there, and then there are residence bays, and then there's no loading bay per se or loading area, and this is an issue, a general issue in that area, with particularly with the sort of situation around COVID and the huge increase in deliveries and delivered groceries and so on and so forth.
So when the residents complaining it's outside the emergency exit, is that in front of a yellow line? Is that in front of a residence bay? Whereabouts is the delivery vehicle parking at that point?
It's parking like immediately outside the delivery door, with the view that the quickest time it takes to make a delivery or pick up is most advantageous. So typically it will be someone bringing a few boxes. The lorry parks in the same area typically as where the bin lorry comes to collect the refuse.
Okay. So is that the carriageway? Is that on the road itself, not on the footway?
Yeah, it's on the road itself, yeah.
Okay, fine. And obviously just a general condition about keeping the forecourt area tidy outside your premises. Obviously you have a age verification policy for your online sales. Possibly a condition about just submitting a copy of the fire assessment to the licensing authority. And obviously meeting with residents groups perhaps twice a year. Are you okay with those conditions?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, and then I think the last two, I think you offered like not smoking within 10 metres of the property, perhaps having a smoking policy, or not smoking directly outside the premises. And I think obviously another condition the committee may wish to consider is a cap on the alcohol limit stored at the premises. So I think do you want to just comment on appropriate caps for the committee to consider, obviously in the office and in the storeroom?
Just to clarify, is the cap, because obviously the wine aspect is not a fire safety concern. So when you're talking about cap, is that from a fire safety?
Yes, yes, yes.
So in which case, are you talking about a cap of spirits?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I believe Mark is probably a better place to talk about the cap on spirits.
So if you could differentiate between in the office and in the storeroom, please.
Yeah, so I mean, I sort of slightly ad hoc, but a limit of 100 sealed bottles of spirits in our office.
Yep.
And then in our storerooms, I'd say a maximum of 300 or maybe 500 litres of spirits, all in sealed containers. So basically the issue here is not to do with the license, but occasionally we do large events in the countryside, say like a Glastonbury festival or like we run bars, and we often need to get a significant quantity of stock in for these events.
Yeah.
So basically it's a kind of fluctuating amount. So typically we'd be at a much lower level, more likely what our stock take said in June, but very occasionally we do have to, for business reasons, get larger quantities delivered, but they tend to move out very quickly.
And how many, sorry, just for my sake, how many pallets would 300 litres be?
That would be about half a pallet.
Half a pallet, okay, thank you. I think that's it for possible conditions for me, unless the committee have got any other conditions they wish to run past the applicant.
Thank you very much. That was very thorough. I still have a slight confusion about the legality of putting a condition regarding alcohol in the storage room, because that is relevant to the business, the licensed premises, but it is not a licensed area. Sharon, I see you've got your hand up. Maybe you can enlighten us. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. That's correct. Any condition can only relate to the licensed premises, which in this case is the office.
Okay, thank you.
That was my understanding, although to be honest, the storage area facilitates the business in the office. Does that have any relevance if we did put a condition on, Sharon?
It wouldn't. The alcohol could be coming from anywhere to the office. Also, just to make it clear that as far as retail sales of alcohol, they would only be covered if they were dispatched from the office. They would not be covered under the licence if they were dispatched from the storeroom.
That is very clear, thank you. And I hope Mr. Hull and Mr. Cook understands that. So if something was to be bought, they needed to access the storeroom, they have to bring it into the office and dispatch and meet the delivery driver from the office. Is that correct, Sharon?
That is correct, Madam. It's just the office that's covered under the licence.
Thank you for that. Committee, any questions regarding just the recent discussion we've just had to legal or licensing, please?
Yes, I'm a bit concerned about the large amount of alcohol that goes to places like Glastonbury. Why does it come from these premises and not from the East London bonded warehouse?
It's because we typically have one vehicle leaving with all of our temporary events, temporary mobile bars and so on. So it would all need to go in the same vehicle.
I can understand that, having run a standard affair myself. It is, yeah, they're only ever allowed kind of one vehicle per operator in. And Councillor Spalding, any questions?
Chairman, just the point on deliveries. I think the applicant agreed the hours of deliveries and dispatches would be limited to office hours 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Yes, that was my understanding of if as a condition. Did you just want clarification on that?
Yeah, exactly, Chairman. Yeah.
Mr. Hill, Mr.
Correct, yes.
Sorry.
That's exactly correct.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you all very much. I think we've explored this. And so thank you all for your patience. We've now reached the end of the hearing, and the committee are going to retire and discuss this in a closed session. So we'll be shortly closing this. And sorry, just getting to the legal bit I need to read out. And a summary of the decision will be sent to the parties in 5 working days, because we do not announce the decision today, and a full decision will follow as soon as possible thereafter with all the reasoning. And so thank you all very much for attending, and the hearing is now closed. Thank you.
Thank you.